Aggregate demand. What is aggregate demand? Aggregate demand refers to the total value of final goods and services which is demanded in an economy in a particular year. In other words, it implies the total amount of expenditure which people are ready to spend, that is, planned expenditure on final goods in the economy. Thus, aggregate demand is an economic measurement of the total amount of demand for all finished goods and services which is produced in an economy. So, finished or final goods can be defined as those goods and services which is used directly for the consumption of our want. Thus, aggregate demand is expressed as the total amount of money which is exchanged for those final goods and services at a specific price level and a particular point in time. Aggregate demand basically consists of all consumer goods, capital goods, factor equipments, exports, imports, and government spending. Now, what are the main components of aggregate demand? The main components of aggregate demand are: number one, private consumption demand, or C. It is the demand for all goods and services of the household of a country during a particular year. So the demand which is made particularly by the household sector in a country for a particular year is called the private consumption demand. Number two, private investment demand, or capital I. The private investment demand refers to the expenditure by private investors on the purchase of goods. So it basically increases the stock of capital and mostly and largely depends upon the rate of interest. Number three, government demand for goods and services, which is denoted by capital G. So this is the amount of expenditure by the government on the purchase of goods of consumption which is meant for collective consumption. It also includes government expenditure on construction of roads, dams, bridge, etc. It is not determined by profit motive rather than by the social welfare motive. And number four, net exports, which is defined as the difference between exports and imports. That is, net exports equals to exports X minus imports M. It refers to the demand of foreign countries for domestic goods and services over domestic demand for foreign goods. So the volume of exports generally depends on the foreign exchange rate. So under the net exports, we find the amount of exports and imports and their subtraction. So symbolically, we can say that the components of aggregate demand, or AD, equals to C plus I plus G plus X minus M.